Have you ever wondered where the real battle begins after a war ends? On the battlefield itself, or in the lives of the soldiers who return home wounded and changed forever? Recently, Russian President Vladimir Putin made a statement that captured global attention. On the surface, it sounded compassionate and reassuring, but beneath it lie questions that remain unanswered. Putin said that Russian soldiers injured in the Ukraine war must receive everything they need from the state to rebuild their lives after the conflict. But the question many are asking is simple. Why now? The war in Ukraine has been going on for quite some time. At the beginning, it was described as a limited military operation. But over time, it has turned into a long, costly, and exhausting conflict. The price of this war is not being paid only with missiles and tanks, but with human bodies and broken minds. Thousands of Russian soldiers have either lost their lives or returned home with injuries so severe that they will shape the rest of their lives. This is the reality that is becoming increasingly difficult to hide. What stood out in Putin's remarks was that he did not speak only about financial assistance. He talked about providing specially adapted housing for wounded soldiers, access to sports and physical rehabilitation, and most importantly, ensuring that their care does not remain the responsibility of the Defense Ministry alone, but of the entire state. These promises sound reassuring, but those familiar with Russia's system are asking a critical question. Can these words truly be turned into action? Soldiers who return from war wounded are not just former fighters. They are living reminders of the true cost of war. Every day, their presence asks society an uncomfortable question. What was the price paid? And was it worth it? Perhaps that is why Putin emphasized that these soldiers must feel they are not a burden, but that they are needed by society. It is a powerful statement, yet it hides a bitter truth. History shows that in many countries, wounded veterans are gradually forgotten. Once the war fades from headlines, the mention of sports and rehabilitation is also not a coincidence. Around the world, injured soldiers are helped not only physically, but psychologically, through structured rehabilitation programs and competitive sports. For Russia, however, this represents a serious challenge. Such efforts require not only funding, but a transparent and efficient system. The question remains whether the Russian state can adapt quickly enough to provide genuine support rather than symbolic gestures. When Putin described this responsibility as a moral obligation of the state, he used a phrase rarely heard in the language of war politics. A moral obligation is not fulfilled by speeches alone. It demands real, measurable action. The war in Ukraine is no longer just a conflict at the border. It has become a social and humanitarian issue within Russia itself. Stories of wounded soldiers, their videos, and their unanswered questions are slowly placing pressure on the official narrative. It is also true that the Kremlin is facing growing internal pressure. As the war drags on, public questions are becoming harder to ignore. Putin's statement may be an attempt to respond to these concerns, or perhaps a preparation for difficult decisions ahead. Yet the core question remains unchanged. Is this truly about caring for wounded soldiers? Or is it driven by political necessity? Wars eventually come to an end, but their scars can last for decades. The soldiers returning home today will be part of Russian society tomorrow. How they are treated will determine how this war is remembered in history. What Putin has said matters, but what matters even more is what happens next. Because in the end, the true test is not in words but in action.